Madison Evans, 29, stared at the contents of the envelope, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The DNA test results confirmed what the elderly stranger had told her an hour ago: her entire life had been a lie. Her parents, the wealthy tech moguls who had showered her sister Amber with an $80 million inheritance, a Beverly Hills mansion, and a custom Tesla, while leaving Madison with nothing, weren't actually her parents at all. They had stolen her as an infant, and her real family had been searching for her for nearly 3 decades. Before I continue this shocking story about family betrayal and the ultimate karma that followed, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more incredible family revenge dramas that will leave your jaw on the floor. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for how this one ends. Growing up in the Evans household had always been an exercise in constant comparison. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Evans, had built their tech security company from nothing into a billion-dollar empire. Our sprawling Seattle mansion overlooked Lake Washington with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the sunrise over the Cascade Mountains. Every morning I'd watch the light dance across the water while wondering why I could never quite measure up in my parents' eyes. My sister Amber was their undeniable favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong. She had our father's sharp blue eyes, our mother's delicate features, and seemingly all of their affection. At 32, Amber had followed perfectly in our father's footsteps, graduating from MIT with honors before joining the family business as Chief Innovation Officer. Meanwhile, I pursued art history at NYU, a choice that was met with thinly veiled disappointment. "Madison, darling," my mother would say in that particular tone she reserved just for me, "wouldn't you rather do something practical?" The way she emphasized practical made it sound like I'd chosen to become a professional bubble blower rather than earn a master's degree from one of the country's top universities. The disparity in how we were treated went beyond mere comments. For Amber's 16th birthday, she received a brand new BMW. For mine, a gift card to Barnes & Noble. When Amber got engaged to Bradley, the son of a senator and a Harvard Business School graduate, my parents threw an engagement party that cost more than most weddings, flying in guests from around the world. When I brought home my boyfriend Michael, a talented but not yet established sculptor I'd met in New York, my father barely looked up from his phone. "He seems nice," was all my mother could muster after he'd left. The pause before nice contained volumes of unspoken judgment. Still, I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that parents don't actually have favorites, that they just connected with Amber in ways they couldn't with me. I told myself this even as the evidence mounted year after year. Last Christmas had been the breaking point. The entire extended family gathered at our parents' winter home in Aspen. Under the towering Christmas tree wrapped in designer paper and enormous bows sat a small mountain of gifts. One by one, Amber opened hers, a diamond necklace from Tiffany's, a first-edition collection of rare books she'd mentioned wanting, keys to a vacation property in the south of France, and the pièce de résistance documents, transferring company shares worth approximately $80 million into her name. "You're the future of this company, sweetheart," my father had said, his voice thick with pride as he hugged her. Then came my turn. I unwrapped a medium-sized box to find a silk scarf from Hermès. It was beautiful, certainly, but represented perhaps 1/20th of what my sister had received. No shares. No property. Not even a heartfelt card. "It's your favorite color," my mother said brightly, as if that made up for everything. Later that night, I overheard them in the study, voices carrying through the old heating vents. "Don't you think we should have given Madison something more substantial?" my mother asked, sounding mildly concerned. "For appearance's sake, at least." My father's response chilled me to the bone. "Eleanor, we've discussed this. Amber is our legacy. Madison, well, she's never quite fit, has she? The company would be in ruins within a year if we left it to her. I'd fled back to my apartment in New York the next morning, making up an excuse about an emergency at work. For months, after I minimized contact, making brief appearances on video calls for birthdays, and sending generic gifts for anniversaries, I was going through the motions, nursing a wound that seemed impossible to heal. Then came my parents' 40th anniversary celebration last month. An elaborate affair at the Four Seasons, with over 300 guests in attendance. I couldn't avoid it without causing a scene, so I put on my bravest face and most expensive dress and prepared to endure another evening of feeling invisible in a room full of people. What I didn't expect was the announcement that would shatter what remained of our family's facade. "We have another special surprise," my father said, clinking his crystal champagne glass to gain everyone's attention. His arm was wrapped proudly around Amber's shoulders. "As many of you know, our daughter Amber has shown exceptional leadership at Evans Technologies. Today, we're thrilled to announce her promotion to co-CEO, with the intention that she'll take full control of the company upon our retirement next year." Applause erupted around the room. My aunt squeezed my hand sympathetically. "Don't worry, dear," she whispered. "I'm sure they have plans for you too." But I knew better. There had never been plans for me. What I didn't know was why. Why the constant disparity? Why the emotional distance? Why the obvious preference for my sister that they barely bothered to hide anymore? I wouldn't have to wonder much longer. The truth was already making its way toward me, carried in the hands of a stranger who would upend everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when the doorbell rang at my Brooklyn apartment. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my first instinct was to ignore it, probably another package delivery for my neighbor that would inevitably be left in front of my door. But something compelled me to answer, perhaps the same inexplicable intuition that sometimes warns us moments before life-changing events. Through the peephole, I saw an elderly woman I didn't recognize. She was perhaps in her mid-70s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes that somehow seemed familiar. She wore a buttoned-up raincoat and clutched a large manila envelope protectively against her chest. "Can I help you?" I asked through the partially open door security chain still in place. "Madison Evans." Her voice was soft but determined, with a slight southern accent that seemed at odds with New York City. "Yes, that's me." She took a deep breath. "My name is Dorothy Harlow. I've been looking for you for a very long time." There was a slight tremor in her voice, as if she were restraining powerful emotions. "May I please come in? I have something important to tell you." Something in her expression, a mixture of hope, anxiety, and profound sadness, made me undo the chain and invite her inside. As she settled onto my couch, I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, partly out of politeness and partly to give myself a moment to process this strange encounter. "No thank you, dear. I've waited too long for this conversation to delay it any further." She placed the envelope on my coffee table but kept her hand on top of it. "What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, perhaps even crazy, but I have proof. And I need you to hear me out completely before you make any judgments." I nodded, a knot of apprehension forming in my stomach. 29 years ago, my daughter Caroline gave birth to twin girls at Memorial Hospital in Seattle. Dorothy's eyes never left mine as she spoke. The babies were identical, perfect little angels with dark hair and the same dimple on their left cheeks. Unconsciously, my hand drifted to the dimple on my own cheek. Caroline and her husband James were overjoyed. They named the girls Emma and Olivia. They had a beautiful nursery prepared with 2 cribs, 2 of everything, all color-coded so they could tell the babies apart while they were so young. My mouth had gone dry. "I don't understand what this has to do with me." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. 3 days after the birth, a nurse came and took one of the babies, Emma, for what she said was a routine test. But Emma never came back. The nurse disappeared. The hospital went into lockdown. Police were called. It was determined that someone had stolen my granddaughter. She pulled a faded newspaper clipping from the envelope and handed it to me. The headline read, "Infant, abducted from Seattle Memorial Hospital, with a date exactly 29 years and 2 months ago." There was a photo of a devastated young couple holding one baby with an inset photo of the missing infant. For years we searched. We hired private investigators. We appeared on television shows about missing children. The case went cold, but we never gave up. Dorothy wiped a tear from her cheek. 2 months ago, James, my son-in-law, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. His dying wish was to find his missing daughter. We hired a new investigator with expertise in using genetic genealogy databases. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear her next words. The investigator found a partial DNA match to our family in one of these databases, someone who appeared to be a first-degree relative to Olivia. It was you, Madison. You had apparently taken one of those ancestry tests last year. I had. It had been a Christmas gift to myself, a curious exploration into my background, perhaps even a subconscious search for belonging, as I felt increasingly alienated from my family. We obtained a sample of your DNA. She must have seen my alarmed expression, because she quickly added, "Legally, our investigator retrieved a coffee cup you discarded at a cafe." The lab comparison showed a 99.9% probability that you are Emma Harlow, Caroline, and James's missing daughter. My granddaughter. She slid the envelope toward me. Everything is in here. The original birth certificates. The DNA test results. News articles about the kidnapping. And recent photos of your biological parents and your twin sister Olivia. With trembling hands I opened the envelope and pulled out its contents. The resemblance between me and the woman in the photo labeled Olivia Harlow was undeniable. We could have been the same person. And in the family photo, I saw my own features reflected in the faces of people I'd never met. My dimple in the woman identified as Caroline, my distinctive widow's peak in the man named James. "This can't be real," I whispered, but deep down a puzzle piece clicked into place. The reason I'd never quite fit with the Evans family suddenly made perfect sense, because I wasn't an Evans at all. "If what you're saying is true," I said, my voice barely audible, "then Richard and Eleanor Evans. They stole you." Dorothy completed my sentence, her voice hardening for the first time. "We believe Eleanor Evans was the nurse who took you. She had nursing training and worked temporarily at several hospitals. Records show she was employed at Seattle Memorial under a different name when you were born. Shortly after your abduction, she and her husband moved to the opposite coast before returning to Seattle years later, when the case had gone cold." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My parents weren't just people who favored one child over another, they were kidnappers who had ripped me from my real family, while lavishing their biological daughter with everything they had. "Why?" I managed to ask. "Why would they take me?" Dorothy's expression softened. "From what we've pieced together, they had been trying to have children for years without success. Eleanor had suffered multiple miscarriages. Then, miraculously, she became pregnant with Amber. But they'd always wanted 2 children. When Eleanor saw identical twin girls at the hospital where she was working, she trailed off, the implication clear. They took me on impulse. The thought made me nauseous. The investigator believes it was planned. Eleanor had been researching the hospital's security procedures. She chose your parents because they were from out of town without a local support network, and because Dorothy hesitated. Because what? Because with identical twins, no one would question if one baby looked different from her parents. You and Olivia both resembled Caroline more than James. If anyone ever questioned why you didn't look like Richard Evans, they could point to Eleanor's genes. The calculated nature of it made my skin crawl. I thought about all the times I'd tried desperately to earn their love, not understanding that in their eyes I was never truly their daughter, just a stolen possession they'd taken to complete their ideal family picture. Your real parents want to meet you, Madison or Emma, which is your birth name. James doesn't have much time left. Please consider coming to Seattle. Dorothy reached out and tentatively touched my hand. You have a whole family waiting to know you. A twin sister who has felt incomplete her entire life. Parents who never stopped looking for you. I stared at the family photo again, at these strangers who shared my blood, my features, potentially even my mannerisms and talents. People who had wanted me, who had searched for me, who had never stopped hoping I would return. I need some time, I said finally. This is overwhelming. Dorothy nodded and stood up. Of course. My number is in the envelope. We're staying at the Marriott downtown for the next week. She moved toward the door, then paused. Whatever you decide, we wanted you to know the truth. You deserved that much. After she left, I sat motionless on my couch for hours, the evidence of my true identity spread out before me. Eventually, I reached for my phone and did something I'd never dared before. I searched Richard and Eleanor Evans' child abduction. What I found would set in motion a chain of events that would bring the Evans empire crashing down, deliver long overdue justice, and finally answer the question that had haunted me all my life. Where do I truly belong? The flight to Seattle felt both endless and too short. For 5 hours, I alternated between staring at the DNA results and the photos of my biological family, the Harlows, people who were simultaneously strangers and my closest blood relatives. My identical twin sister Olivia had my exact features but wore them differently. Her hair was shorter, her smile more confident, her eyes unmarked by the perpetual uncertainty that I'd carried throughout my life. I'd called Dorothy the morning after her visit, after a sleepless night spent reconciling the unimaginable truth. I'll come to Seattle, I had told her. But first I need to confront Richard and Eleanor. Dorothy had been concerned. Are you sure that's wise? Perhaps we should contact the authorities first. No, I'd insisted. I've spent my entire life feeling invisible to them. They don't get to have me disappear again, this time into a police investigation, without looking me in the eyes and explaining why they did this to me, to all of us. I hadn't called ahead. Instead, I took a taxi directly from SeaTac Airport to the Evans mansion, the house I'd grown up in but never felt at home in. The security guard at the gate recognized me immediately and waved me through with a friendly smile, unaware that my visit would shatter the foundation of the family he worked for. The housekeeper, Maria, answered the door, her familiar face lighting up. Miss Madison, we weren't expecting you. She embraced me warmly, and I hugged her back, realizing she had shown me more maternal affection over the years than Eleanor ever had. Are my parents home, Maria? Yes, they're in the solarium with Miss Amber and Mr. Bradley. They're discussing wedding plans. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. The budget keeps growing. Mrs. Evans just approved orchids flown in from Thailand for all the centerpieces. Of course they had. Nothing was too extravagant for their actual daughter. I made my way through the house, each step fueling my resolve. The manila envelope felt heavy in my hands, weighted with decades of lies and stolen moments. Through the glass doors of the solarium I could see them, Richard standing by the window with a tumbler of scotch. Eleanor and Amber hunched over a laptop, presumably reviewing wedding details, while Bradley lounged on a wicker chair scrolling through his phone. A perfect family tableau. One I had never truly been part of. I pushed the doors open without knocking. 4 heads turned in my direction. Madison Eleanor's surprise seemed genuine. What are you doing here? We weren't expecting you until next month for the engagement dinner. Change of plans, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I walked to the center of the room and placed Dorothy's envelope on the glass coffee table. I need to talk to you and Dad. Alone. Amber raised an eyebrow. We're in the middle of something important here, Mads. The wedding is only 8 months away. This is more important, I replied, not taking my eyes off Richard and Eleanor. Something in my expression must have alarmed them because Richard set down his drink. Amber, Why don't you and Bradley continue this at your place? Your mother and I will call you later." After some grumbling, Amber and Bradley collected their things and left. As they passed me, Amber whispered, "Drama queen much." But I barely registered her words. Once the front door closed in the distance, silence descended on the solarium. Richard was the first to break it. "What's this about, Madison? You look troubled." I pushed the envelope toward them. "Open it." Eleanor glanced at Richard before reaching for the envelope. As she pulled out the contents, her face drained of color. Richard moved to look over her shoulder, and I watched as the blood drained from his face as well. "Where did you get these?" His voice had lost its usual commanding tone, replaced by something I'd never heard from him before: fear. "Does it matter? They're true, aren't they?" I struggled to keep my voice from shaking. "You stole me from a hospital in Seattle 29 years ago. I'm not your daughter. I'm Emma Harlow, daughter of Caroline and James Harlow, twin sister to Olivia Harlow." Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. "Madison, I don't know what nonsense someone has been filling your head with. Stop lying." I slammed my hand on the table, making them both flinch. "The DNA tests are conclusive. Your nurse's ID badge is in that file, Eleanor, or should I call you Nurse Jessica Wilson? That was your alias, wasn't it? When you stole me from my mother's hospital room while my father was getting coffee." Richard placed a hand on Eleanor's shoulder, his expression hardening into the cold, calculating look I recognized from tough business negotiations. "Madison, listen to me carefully. Whatever you think you know, I know everything." I cut him off. "I know you couldn't have more children after Amber. I know you worked at multiple hospitals under different names. I know you researched the Harlows and targeted their twins because it would be easier to pass me off as your biological child if I had an identical sister who resembled my birth mother." Eleanor began to weep, her shoulders shaking. Richard's jaw tightened. "Who have you told about this?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. The question sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't even an explanation. It was damage control. "My real family knows. They're the ones who found me after searching for 29 years, while you kept me ignorant of my true identity." I leaned forward. "What I want to know is why. Why tear apart another family? Why raise me alongside your biological daughter if you were only ever going to treat me as second best?" Eleanor's sobs grew louder. Richard's expression flickered between anger and something else, perhaps the first glimpse of shame I'd ever seen in him. "We wanted another child," Eleanor finally managed between sobs. "The doctors said I couldn't carry another pregnancy to term. Adoption agencies had rejected us." Richard's work schedule my history of depression. "When I started working at that hospital and I saw you." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "You were so perfect. Your parents had 2 identical babies. We convinced ourselves they could manage with one, that they'd still have the experience of raising a child who looked exactly like you. You convinced yourselves it wasn't really stealing." I was incredulous. "That my parents wouldn't be devastated, that my twin sister wouldn't feel like a part of her was missing her entire life." Richard's hand tightened on Eleanor's shoulder. "We made a mistake," he said, his voice hollow. "A terrible mistake." "A mistake?" I echoed. "A mistake is forgetting to pick someone up from the airport. You committed a felony. You destroyed lives. We gave you a good life." Richard countered, a flash of his usual arrogance returning. "The best schools, vacations around the world, a beautiful home. You gave me everything except the truth and your love," I shot back, "both of which you reserved exclusively for your real daughter." Eleanor winced at my words. "That's not true. We love you, Madison." "My name is Emma," I said quietly. "And no, you don't love me. You tolerated me. You did the minimum required to maintain your image as generous, loving parents. But I've always known I was different in your eyes." I stood up, gathering the documents and returning them to the envelope. "My biological father is dying of cancer. His last wish is to meet the daughter who was stolen from him. I'm going to grant that wish, and then I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did." Richard stood as well, his face hardening. "Think very carefully about what you're threatening, Madison. This family has resources, connections. If you pursue this vindictively, you could find yourself with nothing." It was meant to intimidate me, but instead it cemented my resolve. "I've already spent my life with nothing from you. What else could you possibly take from me?" I turned to leave, but Eleanor rushed forward, grabbing my arm. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't do this. We can make it right. We'll give you anything: money, property, shares in the company." I gently removed her hand from my arm. 29 years ago you took everything from the Harlows. Now everything you have will be taken from you." As I walked out of that house for what I knew would be the last time, I heard Eleanor collapse into sobs behind me, and Richard making a phone call, his voice urgent as he asked for his lawyer. But their panic and desperation couldn't touch me anymore. In my purse, my phone buzzed with a text from Dorothy Harlow. "Whatever happens, remember, you have family waiting for you. Real family." For the first time in my life I believed it might be true. The Marriott lobby felt both mundane and monumentally significant as I stepped through its revolving doors. Business people tapped on laptops, tourists consulted maps on their phones, and a barista called out coffee orders, all ordinary moments continuing around me while I was about to meet the family I'd been stolen from 29 years ago. Dorothy was waiting by the elevators, her face lighting up when she saw me. "You came," she said, embracing me with the gentle ferocity that only grandmothers seem capable of. "They're upstairs. James is having a good day today. The doctors have him on a new pain management regimen." As we rode the elevator to the 12th floor, Dorothy filled the nervous silence with family details, perhaps understanding instinctively that I needed a moment to prepare. "Caroline, your mother, she's a botanical illustrator. Her work is featured in scientific journals all over the world. James taught engineering at the university before his retirement. And Olivia, your sister, she runs a non-profit that provides educational resources to underprivileged children. She's married to a wonderful man named David, and they have a 3-year-old son, Ethan." I had a nephew. The thought struck me with unexpected force. "They named him after James's father," Dorothy continued. "Family names are important to us. Emma was your grandmother's name, my mother's." The elevator doors opened, and Dorothy led me down the hallway to suite 1214. She knocked softly before using her keycard. I'm not sure what I expected, perhaps a dramatic tear-filled scene from a movie. Instead, what struck me first was the overwhelming sense of familiarity. 3 people looked up as I entered: a slender woman with gray-streaked dark hair and my dimple. A thin man in an armchair, clearly weakened by illness but with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners just like mine did. And her, my twin, my mirror image, who stood frozen for a moment before a sob escaped her lips. "Emma." Caroline whispered, her hand pressed to her mouth. What followed was a blur of embraces, tears, and broken sentences. Olivia couldn't stop touching my face, my hair, my hands, as if confirming I was real. James held on to me with surprising strength for someone so ill, whispering "my little girl" over and over into my hair. Caroline seemed unable to let go of my hand, as if afraid I might disappear again. Hours passed as we shared stories, filling in the vast spaces of our separate lives. They showed me photos of birthdays I'd missed, family vacations I should have been part of, holidays that had always had an empty chair. I learned that Caroline had developed insomnia after my abduction, checking Olivia's crib countless times each night to ensure she was still there. James had channeled his grief into action, becoming an advocate for improved hospital security protocols. And Olivia had grown up knowing about me with a special box where she kept things she wanted to share with me someday: drawings, letters, friendship bracelets, graduation tassels. Every milestone felt incomplete. Olivia explained, her voice breaking. like I was experiencing only half of what should have been happening. I told them about my life with the Evans family, the emotional distance, the constant feeling of inadequacy, the persistent sense that something fundamental was missing. I used to dream about having a sister who understood me, I admitted. I had no idea I actually did. We never stopped looking, James said, his voice weak but determined. Not for a single day. We hired new investigators whenever the previous ones gave up. We followed every lead, no matter how unlikely. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created age progression photos every few years, but they never quite captured you. He smiled, reaching for my hand. You're even more beautiful than we imagined. As afternoon turned to evening, a nurse arrived to administer James's medication. The reality of his illness cast a shadow over our reunion. Time, which had already stolen so much from us, was still working against us. How long? I asked Caroline quietly while James dozed. Weeks, maybe a month, she replied, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. The cancer has spread too far. But he held on to meet you. He made us all promise not to give up until we found you. I thought about the Evans family and the legal storm that was undoubtedly brewing. Richard had likely already mobilized his considerable resources to contain the situation. But looking at my birth father's peaceful face as he slept, I knew with absolute certainty that no power, wealth, or legal maneuver could keep me from spending whatever time James had left at his side. I should tell you, I said, addressing my real family. I confronted Richard and Eleanor, the people who took me before coming here. They'll be preparing a defense. Richard Evans has connections everywhere. Caroline's expression hardened. Let him try. We have DNA evidence, the original nurse identifications, and 29 years of documented searching. But more importantly, she squeezed my hand, we have you back. Olivia nodded in agreement. We've already spoken with the FBI. They're reopening the case based on the new evidence. The statute of limitations hasn't expired for kidnapping. The reality of what this meant hit me fully. Richard and Eleanor Evans would likely go to prison. Their reputation, their company, their social standing, everything they had built would collapse. And Amber, their biological daughter, would watch her parents taken away in handcuffs for a crime committed before she was old enough to remember. Have you ever discovered that your entire life was built on a lie? I never expected that my search for belonging would lead to such an earth-shattering revelation. If you're finding this story as intense as I did living it, hit that like button and subscribe for the next part, where you'll see just how dramatically the tables turned when the truth finally came to light. Trust me, the karma that followed was both devastating and perfectly fitting. As James stirred awake, I pushed these thoughts aside. The Evans family had stolen 29 years from us. I wouldn't allow them to steal a single moment more. Dad, I said, trying out the word that had never felt right when directed at Richard Evans. Would you like to hear about my art history work? I specialize in botanical illustrations, actually. I glanced at Caroline, whose eyes widened in surprise. I never knew where that passion came from. James's smile illuminated his tired face. I'd love nothing more, he said, reaching for my hand. Outside the hotel window, the Seattle skyline glittered as day turned to night, the same city where I had been born and then taken, now witnessing my return. Whatever legal battles lay ahead, whatever media frenzy would inevitably follow this moment, surrounded by people whose features mirrored my own, whose mannerisms I unconsciously shared, whose love for me had never wavered, felt like coming home. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I belonged. The Evans kidnapping scandal broke like a tsunami, devastating everything in its path. It began with a simple press release from the FBI confirming that they were investigating allegations that prominent tech moguls, Richard and Eleanor Evans, had abducted an infant from Seattle Memorial Hospital 29 years earlier. Within hours, every major news outlet had picked up the story. I watched it unfold from the protection of the Harlow family home, a cozy craftsman nestled in Seattle's Wallingford neighborhood, where Caroline and James had raised Olivia, and kept my room waiting a twin bed across from my sister's, its lavender bedspread replaced over the years, but its position unchanged, as if they'd always known I would eventually occupy it. Tech billionaires accused of baby kidnapping screamed the headlines. Evans' family empire built on shocking crime declared another. Cable news channels ran side-by-side photos of Olivia and me, our identical features providing undeniable visual evidence for their viewers. Old footage of the distraught Harlows pleading for information about their missing baby played alongside recent images of the Evans family at charity galas and industry events. Reporters camped outside both the Evans mansion and the Harlow home. We kept the curtains drawn and unplugged the landline after the first day of nonstop calls. Our family lawyer, Mr. Bennett, a silver-haired man who had worked on my kidnapping case pro bono for decades, fielded all communications and coordinated with federal investigators. "The evidence is overwhelming," he told us during a family meeting in the living room. "Eleanor's nursing credentials under the alias have been confirmed. Security footage from the hospital had been archived rather than destroyed, and while it's grainy, it clearly shows her carrying an infant out of the building during her shift. Most damning of all, they have her fingerprints on file from her nursing license application, which match fingerprints found on items in the hospital nursery." "What about Richard?" James asked from his position on the recliner, where he spent most of his days, now an oxygen tank beside him. "Phone records show he was in constant contact with Eleanor that day. Bank records reveal a large cash withdrawal the day before, and the purchase of one-way tickets to Boston immediately after. They're both implicated." Caroline reached for my hand. "And how is this likely to proceed?" Mr. Bennett adjusted his glasses. "They've been arrested and charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, identity fraud, and various other related crimes. Given the high-profile nature of the case and the evidence at hand, the prosecution is confident." However, he cautioned the Evans' legal team is formidable. "They're already attempting to negotiate a plea deal." "Will they serve time?" Olivia asked, voicing the question we were all thinking. "Almost certainly. The question is, how much? Federal kidnapping charges can carry a life sentence, but given their age and the circumstances, they're likely looking at 15 to 20 years minimum." The thought of Eleanor and Richard, both in their 60s, now spending their remaining years in prison gave me no satisfaction. Justice, yes, but no joy. What they had done was unforgivable, but revenge had never been my objective. Finding my true family had been enough. What I hadn't anticipated was Amber's reaction to the news. 3 days after the story broke, as I was helping Caroline prepare dinner, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Madison, it's Bradley, Amber's fiancé." His voice was tense, uncomfortable. "Bradley, how did you get this number?" I moved to the back porch for privacy. "That's not important. Look, Amber needs to see you. She's not doing well with all of this." I hesitated. "I don't think that's a good idea. The lawyers have advised against any contact with the Evans family during the investigation." "Please," he said, an edge of desperation in his voice. "She hasn't eaten in days. She just sits, staring at the news coverage. She needs to hear from you that you didn't know, that you weren't planning this all along." "Planning this?" I was stunned. "Does she think I orchestrated this?" "She's confused and hurt," Bradley said, his voice softening. "She just found out her entire life was built on a crime. That her parents are going to prison. That the sister she grew up with isn't actually her sister. She needs closure." Against my better judgment and Mr. Bennett's explicit advice, I agreed to meet Amber at a small coffee shop halfway between our locations. I told Olivia where I was going, promising to text her every 30 minutes to confirm I was safe. The Amber who met me at the cafe bore little resemblance to the polished, confident woman I'd grown up alongside. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes red-rimmed, her designer clothes wrinkled as if she'd slept in them. She looked up as I approached her table, her expression a battlefield of conflicting emotions. "You came," she said, her voice hoarse. "Of course I came." I sat across from her, noticing how people at nearby tables were trying to discreetly take photos of us with their phones. The twins from the scandal, meeting face to face. "Why?" she asked bluntly. "After everything, why would you agree to see me?" I considered my answer carefully. "Because for 29 years I believed you were my sister. That connection doesn't just disappear overnight, even with everything that's happened." Her laugh was bitter. "So you don't hate me, the golden child who got everything while you got nothing." "I never hated you, Amber. I envied you, yes. I was hurt by the disparity in how we were treated. But that wasn't your fault, you didn't know the truth either." Tears filled her eyes. "Did you know they're going to lose everything? The company is in freefall, the board has already voted them out. Our family name is ruined." She leaned forward. "Was it worth it destroying everyone just to get back at them for not loving you enough?" The accusation stung, but I recognized it as grief talking. "This isn't about revenge, Amber. It's about justice, not just for me, but for the Harlows. My biological parents had their child stolen from them. My twin sister grew up without her other half. My birth father is dying of cancer, and his last wish was to see me before he passes. And what about my father, my mother? Don't they deserve mercy? They committed a serious crime, Amber. They made a choice 29 years ago that hurt countless people. They gave you everything," she countered, her voice rising. "A beautiful home, the best education opportunities most people would kill for. Everything except the truth and unconditional love," I replied quietly. "And they took from me the chance to know my real family, to grow up with my twin, to be part of a home where I truly belonged." Amber's anger seemed to deflate, replaced by a profound weariness. "I keep thinking about every birthday, every Christmas, every family dinner. Were they looking at you and seeing their crime? Was that why they could never quite connect with you?" The question pierced me, because it had occurred to me as well. I don't know. Maybe loving me fully would have meant confronting what they did. Or maybe they simply couldn't love a child that wasn't biologically theirs. We sat in silence for a while, two women whose lives had been irrevocably altered by choices made before we had any agency. "What happens now?" Amber finally asked. "Richard and Eleanor will face trial unless they accept a plea deal. The company will move forward without them. And I'll get to know my biological family for whatever time my father has left. And us." There was vulnerability in her question that I'd never heard from Amber before. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "We're not sisters by blood, but we shared a childhood. Maybe in time we can build something new, something based on truth this time." She nodded, wiping away tears. "I'd like that. I think I need it, actually. You're the only one who understands what this feels like, having your entire identity called into question overnight." As we parted, Amber hugged me, perhaps the first genuine embrace we'd ever shared. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything you lost because of my parents." "I'm sorry for what you're losing now," I replied, meaning it. The media captured our meeting, of course. By evening, Yvonne's sisters reconcile amidst family scandal was trending online, with blurry cafe photos accompanying speculation about what we'd discussed. But some moments belong only to those who live them, and I kept the details of our conversation private. The legal proceedings against Richard and Eleanor Evans moved with unusual speed for such a complex case. Perhaps it was the overwhelming evidence, or perhaps it was Richard's ultimate decision against the advice of his high-priced legal team to accept a plea deal rather than drag the family through a public trial. The day they entered their guilty pleas, I sat in the courtroom with the Harlow family, watching as the couple who had raised me admitted to kidnapping, conspiracy, and fraud. Eleanor wept as she read her statement, describing her desperation after multiple miscarriages and the momentary madness that led her to take someone else's child. Richard stood stoically beside her, his former imposing presence diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the weight of his crimes. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, addressed them directly during sentencing. You stole not just a child, but 29 years of memories, experiences, and connections that can never be recovered. While I acknowledge your expressions of remorse, the premeditated nature of this crime and its devastating impact on multiple lives demands significant consequences. Eleanor received 15 years, Richard 18 sentences that ensured they would spend their golden years behind bars. As they were led away, Eleanor looked back at me, her expression pleading, but whatever forgiveness she sought wasn't mine alone to give. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Mr. Bennett handled most of the media relations, but Caroline stepped forward briefly. Today brings a measure of justice, but no court decision can restore the years we lost with our daughter. We're grateful to have Emma back in our lives and ask for privacy as our family heals. That healing took many forms in the months that followed. James's condition deteriorated rapidly after the trial, as if he had been holding on just long enough to see justice served. We moved him home from the hospital, converting the living room into a comfortable space where he could be surrounded by family during his final days. In those precious weeks, I came to know my birth father through shared quiet moments, early mornings when we were both awake before the others, him in his hospital bed, me curled in an adjacent armchair with tea. He told me stories of his childhood in rural Oregon, his courtship with Caroline, his dreams for the twin daughters he'd been so excited to welcome. I used to imagine teaching you and Olivia to build things, he said one morning, his voice weak but his eyes bright with memory. I had plans for a treehouse in the backyard with 2 platforms connected by a bridge, one for each of you. You could teach me now, I suggested gently. Maybe not a treehouse, but something small we could build together. That project became our focus, a simple wooden jewelry box with 2 compartments, one lined with blue velvet, Olivia's favorite color, one with green, which I'd discovered was mine. James directed while I worked under his guidance, my hands becoming his as weakness prevented him from holding tools. We finished it 2 days before he passed away peacefully in his sleep, Caroline on one side of his bed, Olivia and I on the other. His last words to me had been, "My family is complete again." The jewelry box now sits on my dresser in what has become my room in the Harlow house. I moved in permanently after James's funeral, unable to imagine being anywhere else during this time of grief and reconnection. Caroline and I discovered shared interests beyond our mutual love for botanical illustration, a preference for mystery novels, an inability to resist stray animals, a tendency to laugh until we cry at absurd moments. Olivia and I developed the unique bond that only twins can understand, finishing each other's sentences within weeks, sensing each other's moods without words. I also kept my promise to Amber. Once a month we met for coffee or lunch, carefully rebuilding a relationship unencumbered by competition or favoritism. She was finding her own path, now stepping away from Evans Technologies, which was struggling to survive the scandal, and exploring opportunities that aligned more with her personal interests than her parents' expectations. "I'm thinking about teaching," she confided during one of our meetings. "Business administration at the community college. I've always enjoyed mentoring the interns at the company, but never had time to pursue it seriously." "You'd be excellent at that," I told her sincerely. "I visited them last week," she said after a pause. "Mom and Dad. They're in different facilities, of course." "How are they doing?" Amber sighed. Dad's stoic, making the best of it, already running the prison library, and giving financial advice to other inmates. Mom is struggling more. She asked about you. I tensed. What did she want to know? "If you're happy. If you've found what you were looking for." Amber studied my face. Have you? The question made me reflect on the whirlwind transformation of my life. I'm grieving and healing, and discovering who I am all at once, I answered. But yes, I've found where I belong, which is something I never had before, so in that way I'm happier than I've ever been. 6 months after James's passing, I received an unexpected letter from Eleanor. Mr. Bennet vetted it first, ensuring it contained nothing manipulative or harmful before passing it along. Inside was a single page of prison stationery and a small key. Madison, or Emma as I understand you prefer now, she wrote. No apology can undo the harm we've caused, and I won't insult you with attempts at justification. I write only to give you something that is rightfully yours. The enclosed key opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank account #71E3. Inside are shares in Evans Technologies that Richard and I purchased in your name when you were born, separate from the company holdings we gave Amber. We never told you about them because they were meant to be a surprise when you turned 30. Whatever you choose to do with them, sell them, donate the proceeds, burn the certificates, the choice is entirely yours. They represent a fraction of what we owe you, but they are given without expectation or condition. Eleanor. The safety deposit box contained share certificates worth approximately $12 million, a significant sum, though nowhere near the $80 million Amber had received. I spent weeks deliberating what to do with this unexpected inheritance. It felt tainted by its source, but also like an opportunity to create something meaningful from the wreckage of the past. Ultimately, I established the Emma Harlow Foundation for Missing Children, using the funds to support families searching for abducted children and to improve hospital security protocols nationwide. At the Foundation's first fundraising gala, Amber made a surprise appearance announcing her own substantial donation. This can't undo what my parents did, she told the gathered crowd. But perhaps it can prevent other families from experiencing similar pain. Life settled into a new normal. I transferred my job to a Seattle museum specializing in the preservation and display of botanical illustrations, many created by my mother, whose work I now promoted with pride. Olivia and I celebrated our 30th birthday together, our first shared celebration surrounded by family and friends who marveled at our identical laughs and synchronized movements. Late that night, after the guests had gone and the house had quieted, Olivia and I sat on the porch swing, sharing a blanket against the cool Seattle air. Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if you hadn't been taken? She asked softly. All the time, I admitted. We would have grown up sharing everything: clothes, friends, secrets. We would have fought over bathroom time and stolen each other's boyfriends, she teased. We would have had inside jokes that drove Mom and Dad crazy. We would have been inseparable. I reached for her hand. We are now. Olivia squeezed my fingers. Better late than never, sister. As we swayed gently in the swing our father had built decades ago, wide enough for twin girls to share, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past couldn't be rewritten, but the future stretched before us, full of possibilities for the connection that had been interrupted but never truly broken. 1 year to the day after James Harlow's passing, I stood in the Seattle Memorial Hospital's newly renovated maternity ward, cutting a ribbon to officially open the James Harlow Security Center. Funded by the Emma Harlow Foundation, the center featured state-of-the-art infant monitoring systems, enhanced security protocols, and comprehensive training programs for hospital staff. My father's greatest wish was for no family to experience what ours did, I told the assembled crowd of hospital administrators, security experts, and media representatives. Today, that wish moves closer to reality. Caroline and Olivia stood beside me, pride and bittersweet emotion evident in their matching dimpled smiles. In the front row sat Dorothy, now using a cane, but still sharp as ever, alongside Olivia's husband David and their son Ethan, now 4, and fascinated by the oversized scissors I'd used for the ribbon. After the ceremony, a young nurse approached me hesitantly. Miss Harlow, I just wanted to say how much your story has meant to me. I was adopted as an infant, and your foundation helped me locate my birth mother last month. These encounters had become common people, sharing how their lives had been touched by the foundation's work, or by the simple power of our family's story. Each one reinforced that something meaningful had emerged from the tragedy that had shaped my life. Later that evening, Caroline hosted a small dinner at home to mark the anniversary of James's death. Rather than a somber occasion, we'd decided to celebrate his life and legacy. The dining room table, handcrafted by James decades ago, was extended to accommodate our growing circle: Dorothy, Olivia, David and Ethan, my cousin Michael and his wife, Caroline's sister Beth, and somewhat surprisingly Amber. Her inclusion had been my suggestion. Over the past year, our monthly meetings had evolved into genuine friendship. Amber had left Evans Technologies entirely, the company having been acquired at a fraction of its former value. She was now teaching business courses and dating a fellow professor, a kind, unpretentious man who seemed to appreciate the authentic person she was becoming away from her parents' shadow. To James, Caroline raised her glass, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Who never lost hope. To Dad, Olivia and I said in unison, a synchronized response that no longer surprised any of us. As conversation and laughter filled the room, I slipped away briefly to the back porch, needing a quiet moment to absorb the fullness of my heart. The wooden swing creaked gently as I settled into it, looking out at the garden where Caroline's botanical knowledge and my newfound interest in horticulture had combined to create something beautiful. Mind if I join you? Amber's voice came from the doorway. Please do. I moved over to make room. She sat beside me, both of us quiet for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of family conversation inside. I visited them yesterday, she said finally. Mom and Dad. It's their anniversary. I nodded, unsure what to say. Richard and Eleanor Evans remained a complicated presence in both our lives: Amber's biological parents, and my kidnappers, her foundation, and my trauma. Mom asked about you, Amber continued. She always does. I told her about the security center dedication. How did she react? She cried. Said it was fitting that something good should come from what they did. Amber turned to look at me. She asked if I thought you'd ever forgive them. The question hung in the air between us. Forgiveness had been a complex journey, one I'd explored in therapy sessions and late-night conversations with Olivia and Caroline. I don't know, I answered honestly. I've made my peace with what happened. I don't carry anger anymore. But forgiveness, that's different. I understand, Amber said, surprising me. I'm still working through my own feelings about them. Loving them while acknowledging what they did, it's not simple. Nothing about this has been simple, I agreed. Except maybe this. Amber gestured toward the house where laughter had erupted over something Ethan had said. You found where you belong. That part seems right. I smiled, recognizing the truth in her words. You'll find your place too, Amber. You already are. She nodded, a quiet certainty in her expression that hadn't been there a year ago. Different from what was planned for me, but better because it's mine. We rejoined the gathering inside where Caroline was serving James's favorite dessert, blackberry cobbler with vanilla ice cream. As I looked around the table at these people who had become my world, some by blood, some by choice, I felt the final pieces of my identity settle into place. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. For months, I'd been working on a memoir documenting my extraordinary journey from Madison Evans to Emma Harlow, from lost to found. The story had captured public imagination and a publisher had offered a contract, but something had held me back from completing the final chapter. I began to type, the words flowing easily now. Identity is not a simple matter of DNA or legal documents. It's built through connections, through belonging, through the reflection of yourself you see in others' eyes. For 29 years, I lived as someone partially detached from my own life, sensing but unable to name the disconnection at my core. I once believed finding my true family would provide all the answers I sought. In some ways it did, explaining my artistic inclinations, my dimpled smile, my inexplicable feelings of loss. But the greater gift was discovering that identity isn't fixed or singular. It's a tapestry we weave throughout our lives, incorporating threads from all our experiences. I am Emma Harlow, daughter of Caroline and James, twin sister to Olivia. I am also shaped by my years as Madison Evans, by prestigious schools and art museums, and the painful yearning to belong. Both experiences, the life stolen from me and the life I was given instead, have formed the person I am today. The greatest justice isn't found in courtrooms or prison sentences, though those have their place. It's found in reclamation of family, of truth, of self. It's found in creating meaning from suffering and connection from loss. My father's last project sits on my dresser, a wooden box with 2 compartments crafted by his design through my hands. It holds mementos from both my lives, a childhood photo with Amber, my first museum badge, a pressed flower from James's funeral, the hospital bracelet Caroline kept from the day Olivia and I were born. 2 compartments, 1 hole. Just like me. I saved the document and closed my laptop, the memoir now complete. Outside my window, the Seattle night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights. Somewhere across town, Amber was perhaps looking at the same sky. Across the hall, Olivia breathed in the same rhythm she had when we shared a womb. Downstairs, Caroline slept in the room she had once shared with James, surrounded by mementos of their life together, including photos of the twin daughters they had created. My journey had been extraordinary by any measure, from the crime that separated me from my biological family to the twist of fate that reunited us. But the most profound discovery wasn't the dramatic revelation of my true identity. It was the quiet understanding that belonging isn't something given to us by others. It's something we create ourselves through connections that transcend even the most painful circumstances. Have you ever experienced a moment when everything in your life suddenly made sense? When pieces you didn't even know were missing finally clicked into place? This story of family identity and ultimately justice has been deeply personal for me to share. If it resonated with you in any way, I'd be truly grateful if you'd hit that like button and consider subscribing to my channel for more stories about life's unexpected turns and the lessons we learn along the way. What family secrets or surprising discoveries have shaped your life? Share in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for journeying with me through this chapter of my life, and remember, sometimes our greatest strengths come from our deepest wounds. Like, subscribe, share this video if it moved you, and I'll see you in the next one.